I would like you to join the conversation in this particular one because we did this last one on the Afarensis and also the Neanderthals, and there's a lot of going on in anthropology with the Denisovans they're finding, and basically just all these different types. When we look at human evolution, the model is that here we come from this primitive ape, Afarensis, and it came down from the trees, and it started growing, more intelligent as it started foraging. And it's just, to me, it's always been kind of suspect. I never really felt that it was the true story of where we came from, and it just didn't feel right. I don't know. What did you think about evolution, human evolution, whenever you first heard that we came from apes and the evidence that you were presented, Dave? What was kind of your first reaction?
For me, I always go back to the meme. Well, if we came from apes, why are there still apes? And right. It's like, that's not how I view it, but that's what I always think of. Is I always think of that meme, and yeah, we're similar. Our genetics are almost identical. You can tell that apes have gone through processes of learning and evolving just like humans have. I think at some point a long time ago is when we were related to apes. I think that at some point it could have been like even the aquatic ape theory, like, you've presented a couple of times and we've talked about. I really want to think that the weird thing to me is you have Asian people, you have people in Africa, you have people in Northern Europe, you have people in Peru, you have people in Utah, Indians, specifically from ancient times, and they all look so significantly different.
Yeah.
And you would think if there was millions of years of interbreeding going on, everyone would look the same. So we still, these days, we end up with these like 6 or 7 real distinct groups of very different looking people. I mean, if you see a guy from Japan, he's not from California, or whatever, or he's not an Indian, an American Indian.
Yeah.
And
right. You have these Caucasoid,
so
Mongoloid,
black and white,
Negroid, what is it, Australoid? There's the five the 5 root species, and so that's a whole question in itself. Is like, where did each one of those?
Yeah, it's 5
come from, because you have they're so distinct, and so what are their direct lineages, and how does this line up with this Homo sapiens, Homo Neanderthals, and this Heidelbergensis stuff, which these modern types? But I mean, there's a lot of gaps in here, and talking with other people about it, it's like there's still so many. If some of these are primates, and then some are like a little more modern than primates, but not human. It just looks like you have this, this very wide spectrum of a hominid type creature that comes in all different shapes and sizes. And I think that some of them may not even be related at all to each other. They're just completely different creatures that have their own.
Well, you would think that it would taper, it should taper. There should be some sort of, it just coming together at some point, where we're, I mean, you're talking millions of years ago. This graph says millions of years ago. I mean, it's like, so we're 10, 12,000 years old right now in our present so-called iteration. Here we are. I mean, compared to millions of years ago, how many times? So yeah, this is basically like when you look at the, a bad bingo card. You got little spots here and there, but you get all these empty spaces, and you're not going to win. And that's what I look at, is I see just so many voids in so many places where there's whole, it could be 200,000 year long processes that are taking place that are completely unrepresented here. All of that could be under a specific set of tectonic plates. So it's something we'll never find, and that's what it is. I think you have a difference between fossils that are still available to be found, or still able to be identified and dug for and put together into cohesive packages of civilizations or whatever. And then you have other times that could have been hundreds of thousands of years where just poof, everything just disappeared and was just completely and absolutely wiped out. So, the missing link is probably going to be missing for some time.
Yeah. And then there's the whole question of like, well, I mean, is there any type of interventionary thing going on, talking with Cremo and
Right.
listening to research like that, it makes you think, well, if you have modern sapiens that have been found in strata and real evidence that shows that some of these types are, I mean, you look at this model and this is just what they have found and what they've recorded in that particular strata. But what research has shown is that these sapien types here, these modern ones, have been found way back here in these Afarensis areas. And so they're presenting this to be this movement forward in time, but in all honesty, a lot of this evidence is actually more shooken and mixed, where you have, a lot of these types.
Could it be a misinterpretation?
Yeah, I mean, what if they all existed to a large degree at the same time? And then that raises a bigger question.
My big question is, Josh. Well, my big question is, when someone who just looks at this graph right here, they're going to look and they're going to go, oh, well, this particular guy, he must have been really primitive. Look at the features of the skull. This guy right here, he probably wasn't even walking upright. For all we know, all of these skulls we see were from people who drove cars, or people who flew airplanes, or people who invented things, or people who lived in a society where they had nuclear power. Just because of the way the skulls look, and they're found in strata. So really, there's a lot of things that could be mixed in with them. But unless they can identify the strata around them, they really can't tell their level of advancedness. And so that's what I'm seeing is certain styles of humans or types of humans have probably just been lucky not to be part of some cataclysmic event. And then there were probably, for all we know, complete societies just like our own, or even more complex, that were just completely just destroyed and crushed between tectonic plates and never to be found again. It's our fossil fuel, or whatever they want to call it, fossil fuel or not. But for all we know, that could be, remnants of societies that were more advanced of our own. You're not allowed to think these thoughts. You're not allowed to present these thoughts to professors. You're not allowed to think about these things or even wonder about it, because we've already told you what is true. And so that's why there's such a void. And you're looking for all these, like you said earlier, you're looking for all these things that are missing, along the timeline. And I think a lot of them aren't missing. I think they've just been ignored or, rinsed from history because they just didn't fit into the narrative.
So in that pipeline,
so that's where Michael's cool, because he just knows better.
In that same pipeline, we're bringing up this article that just kind of supports it, that showing that Neanderthals were more like cousins.
Yeah.
And if you look, I mean, they're obviously giant brains, right? So just because they don't look like us doesn't mean that they aren't as smart or could have been smarter. But they're saying that 200,000 years ago in northern Israel, a small band of tech-savvy humans dragged home a dismembered bounty of wildlife. Using exquisitely pointed flint spearheads and blades, they hunted and butchered myriad prey. It's saying that Homo sapiens, dated between 177,000 and 194,000 years ago, were also found. So they were kind of co-mingling. And it's looking kind of like not only did we commingle, but we kind of crossbred. That these, I mean, for animals, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so that's interesting, So what that scene of us coexisting together with these different creatures and finding them, you'd have to find them. There has to be some kind of knowledge between the two species that those people knew. Right. Those people knew the answers, right? They knew where they came from, right? Something was known.
Well, they knew that like a platypus is not going to mate with an elephant.
Right. I mean, that's my point, is that they knew each other. Somehow they knew the answer. Um,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
to me very fascinating, right? Where you have 200,000 years ago, these two.
Well, and it's fascinating that they are all cave people. They're all cave people, but really, I mean, were they the only people around, or are they the only ones that we found evidence of? And was there someone else along with them that was much more advanced? And these people were possibly like serfs, or they were being genetically mixed or purposely created or whatever. Not in some magical alien way, but just by a superior race of beings that might have understood that. It makes you think that was there another race that we're not finding evidence of?
It's interesting. I just feel like that if there's two creatures that are willing to mate with each other when they look very, very different,
Yeah,
and they, their skulls are very disalike, and they probably would have looked very vaguely similar, but it's the stature and
sure.
the facial, and that in nature and biology, I mean, that stuff is kind of tied to the attraction is tied to the reproduction cycle. It's like you're specifically attracted
Don't
to certain look, a
don't
certain
the
look.
genetics have to be similar?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it has to be
Yeah, don't the
built in.
genetics have to be similar for them to actually mate?
It would have to be built in within their DNA to some degree for them to be able to be attracted to
Yeah, yeah,
each other, in order to find to mate. And so it's not like they're
yeah.
making. It's not like they're making like
Right.
high society decisions on. Well, it's exotic, so I like it. Or like, oh, so this is something that came
Yeah,
about through their DNA. So it's like, so they're kind of the missing link to me.
and
I think that Neanderthals are the missing link to the story of where humans came
yeah,
from. So there's some mystery in that coexistence, and it's really fascinating.
it's odd because you look at them and they're so different. The skulls are so different. So you want to think one turned into the other or one had features of the other, but they could have been completely different. And the only thing making them able to mate would be the genetics, working. And I don't think back then if you had Homo sapiens, that Homo sapiens would be predisposed to mating with a monkey or a chimp or
Right,
a gorilla,
right,
because at that point I think they were formed into a person who was avoiding those kind of animals because they would bite you or they would be territorial, and they were sort of like your nemesis at that point. It's not like chimps and people were getting along, so I would think there was a point just way, way farther back where if we were basically genetically branched off from monkeys or apes or whatever, it would have had to have been so long ago that it was just like a freak of nature. It just happened, and two life forms got it on or whatever, and it just somewhere it happened, and then just grew, to a degree where these hairless monkeys just started, becoming a relevant species, and
yeah.
that has to be what it was.
I don't know,
It's
man. I
not like it
don't.
just changed over 10,000 years,
No,
Yeah.
it didn't. But that's the point. Is it's like it can't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it was like whoops and then accidental
Right.
proliferation, and then here we are.
It had to be a long
I
term thing.
something, yeah. It's saying here new studies made possible by part of a computational technique that enabled researchers to analyze huge quantities of genetic data that showed that humans, Homo sapiens, and Neanderthals interbred far more than previously imagined. Indeed, their proclivity for pairing off has led many researchers to question the old dictum that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were actually separate species. So it could be kind of like what you're
Could they be
talking about.
like Asian people,
Right. That's
like
what I mean.
versus
This could have been
white
more of,
people?
right,
Yeah. So basically,
right,
it was you were just hanging out with a different girl. You went out with an Asian girl instead
correct.
of two white people.
Right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there we are. That's I guess the meat of what I was trying to get out of the article, and also just kind of the timeline is that when we look at stuff like this, and we see these,
Yeah.
this is not progression. This is just all different types coexisting,
Chilling.
to a large degree.
Yeah.
A lot of these
There's chunks.
coexisted. They didn't
Yeah.
come from each other. They didn't evolve from each other. They coexisted with each other, and some of them were enough alike that they were able to actually mate and pair. And now it's showing that we actually all of
And
us
the fossil
have
record.
some Neanderthal DNA within each human. So they must have done it
Right.
enough that we all have some Neanderthal in us.